Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. That is from us here in Kenya, and good day wherever you are in the world. And welcome to a very special edition of We Table It. And normally we hold our talks on Saturday in the evening around this time. But today we're doing something different. We're holding our talk today, Tuesday, the 2nd of April, because there is something that we would like to celebrate. And that's why we have this special session today. So thank you so much for joining us from everywhere you are in the world. Now, before we start, I'll tell you a little bit about We Table It. We Table It is a platform that looks at what is happening in society so that we're able to actually offer narratives that lead to change. And We Table It as a platform is available on different sites. So you can find us on Facebook, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and also on YouTube. And when we go live on Facebook, on YouTube, as well as on Twitter. So hopefully you're joining us from any of those three platforms, sorry, and you're very welcome. I'm your host today, Valerie Siganga, and I have two co-hosts, that is Eno Onukpo and Osaro Aigbogun, and together we form the team at We Table It. So before we jump into the delicious, interesting, inspiring, moving topic that we want to talk about today, I'll ask that you like our page if you've not liked it, subscribe to our video pages if you've not done so yet. And when you do that, you'll be up to date on our latest topics, which really touch on social issues that affect people from all over the world. So please make sure that you're following us so that you never miss out on any interesting topic that we want to bring your way. And again, thank you so much for joining us today here at We Table It. So, where do I begin in terms of our interesting topic today and what it is that we're actually celebrating? So, today we are celebrating World Autism Awareness Day. And that's what today is all about. And what a fantastic day it is. So I'll just touch a bit on this beautiful ribbon that you see here and what does it represent. When we talk about autism, we talk about a spectrum. It's so much more than one thing. And when we look at all these different puzzle pieces with different colors, we see how it is that they really do fit within each other and add so much light and brightness to what it is that they represent. So that's what I'd like us to really talk about and focus on today when we talk about World Autism Awareness Day. Now, one reason that this topic is actually one I wanted us to speak about, and I thought that this day was very fitting, is because living in Africa, I am a parent to a child who is on the autism spectrum. And it has really been a journey of learning, of understanding, of acceptance, and of being innovative when thinking of ways that I could support my child in terms of his learning and his development. My son is 9 years old, and as mentioned earlier, is on the autism spectrum. So, being World Autism Awareness Day, it's likely that you've heard a lot of different definitions or ways that people are talking about autism. And what I'd like to do today, as I'm sharing with you, is really give it an experience, talk to you from my experience and my perspective. And my hope in doing that is that somebody would be able to relate with what I am talking about. And hopefully, for the lessons that I've learned, that's something that somebody would be able to bring into their own awareness as they move forward, experiencing autism, living with people who have autism, caring for people who have autism, because definitely it is a journey. And so that is really what I'd like to talk about today. And it's interesting when I was thinking about how to approach this specific topic, one of the things I wondered about is how much do you share of your life? How much do you share of facts, of statistics, of information that's out there on autism? And what I realized is actually there's no separation, they all go hand in hand. And so that's how we're going to talk about autism, specifically today, autism in Africa, and share what that looks like. Now, before I move forward, remember if you do have any questions, any comments, you can put them in the chat section and we'll discuss those as well. All right. So let's start at the very beginning. And the very beginning is, what is autism? What is it? You know, um, as I've grown into understanding autism, I've learned that autism is actually a spectrum disorder. And what that actually means is that it's not one thing, right? A spectrum is a range of things. So, see, you could say that no two people with autism are the same because they'll be on different places within this spectrum. So, let me begin with explaining what I thought autism was before having a child who has autism. So before having a child with autism, I thought autism, in my mind, was a condition where children disappear into their own worlds. So I thought basically it would be somebody who you're unable to communicate with, unable to speak with. They are there with you, but they're sort of in their own world, in their own space, and you just coexist. And that they do things completely on their own. So that was my perception of autism. But it also went beyond that because I also thought autism was children who were unable to control themselves physically. And what that looked like for me is children who are unable to control maybe their drool, um, children who have erratic movements, children who are basically disabled really physically and unable to do anything. And so I always looked at autism before being a parent of a child with autism as really a dark place, a place of disability, a place where you're living with somebody who is there physically, but not there with you mentally. So that's what I thought autism was. And I remember the day my son was just about to turn 2 years old, and we'd gone for regular checkups at the hospital. And the doctor asked me about certain milestones he had not met. And there were so many reasons that was given that he had not met the milestones. He was born premature. He was a boy. He was my first child. So basically, the explanation was all these factors have contributed to him not meeting his milestones. But then that day, I met a doctor. We'd gone for a checkup, and the doctor told me, I suspect that your child has autism. And I remember looking at this doctor and thinking, there is absolutely no way my child could have autism. And from that day, I said, I'm never seeing this person again because how dare they actually say something like that? I mean, this is my child, my one and only, my little angel. So how could that be? And so instead of dealing with this diagnosis, my response to the first occurrence of potential autism in my child was to react with anger, to take it out on the doctor, to hold them accountable, and to blame them for being disrespectful by even just suggesting that this could be my reality. And so that's how my journey with autism began. And so, what did I do in that space of this is not my child? I said, okay, if there is any delayed milestone, let's work on that until we meet that milestone. And that's the way my journey sort of began. So, why do I share this with you in this way today? I share it with you because one of the things that I want to really bring out for people who are experiencing the autism diagnosis for the first time is that there's a lot of misconceptions about what autism is, what it's about, and what it means. And this, I think, from an African perspective, has historical roots whereby people who were not, I'll say, neurotypical or in quotes, normal in the way that they fit into society, they would say that there's something wrong with the family, would say there's something wrong with the person. I mean, some of the things that I've heard, not directly related to me, but in general for people who have children that may have any sort of mental challenge or physical challenge, is maybe there's witchcraft involved. Maybe one of the parents did something and they're getting punished for it. Maybe there is sin. Maybe there's a curse. There's all these reasons that are out there and beyond to rationalize why somebody would be different. And so when you think of those misconceptions, even in today's time, whether we really believe them or not, they are thoughts that are there. And having those thoughts can interrupt how it is that we handle or deal with somebody who's on the autism spectrum. So that is a little bit of my perception in terms of what, autism means in Africa, right? So now just a little bit of, all right, now once I got past the anger and all those different things, then what did autism look like for me? You know? And here, this is some of the words that come to mind when you think autism, especially when you don't have any background information on it. And these words come based on what it is that you observe an autistic person doing, their special behaviors and their ways of being that we might not understand, you know? And so, yes, thank you, Osaro, for the comment. It really is in the definition. When we talk about a spectrum, it is so broad and it is wide. There's different levels and ways that people are autistic. So, yes, it's important to always remember that. Now, here, when we look at autism, in just this simple, I don't want to call it definition, let me call it a definition bubble. So, looking at this bubble, we look at repetitive behavior, restricted behavior, self injury. We see words like disorder, different perceptions, rituals that the person does, rolling of their head, different behaviors, inability to adjust to change, compulsive behavior, different from the population, a disturbance, something wrong with the family. But then there's other elements to autism, somebody who has superior skills, someone who's educationally gifted, somebody who is really they're very good at memorization. They've got high interests, they're complex individuals. So autism really depends on how it is that you perceive it and look at it and what that means for you. So these are sort of, I think, I don't want to call them generic because they are standard ways of looking at autism. But I'll share with you my experience and how I've learned to define autism when in relation to my son who has autism. So the first thing when it came to really accepting this condition and understanding what it's like to have a child with autism, I began by looking at what is it that he likes and what is it that makes him stand out. So I realized that one of the things that really does affect him is what we call sensory issues, sensory challenges, sensory disturbances. For the most part, he will be fine until something in his environment will trigger a reaction. And it could be something as low as a sound, a specific smell, a bright light, but he is sensitive to those things. And the way he will react to being triggered by something in his environment is normally physically or with a sound. So he will react in some way that is different from the way you and I, as neurotypical people, would normally react. And I figured this out by taking an example, and trying really, really to experience the world the way I believe he experiences it. And I'll share that example with you. So consider that you are going into a supermarket. You just want to pop into the supermarket, buy a packet of milk, a packet of bread for your evening tea, and go back home. And when you walk into the supermarket, you've got your trolley and you push it and you get to pick things from the shelves, get to the till, and walk out. So for you, that is just a typical shopping experience. Now, what would that look like for somebody who may be on the autism spectrum? This is a completely different sensory experience. And so, this is what I believe, and I've sort of observed that my son experiences when doing something as simple as going into the supermarket. So, first of all, we get to, let's say, the trolleys. The trolleys normally have wheels, one or two wheels will squeak. So, there's already a sound disturbance there. When we get into the supermarket, there's people talking, there's machines beeping, there's cash trays being opened and closed, there's things being piled onto shelves, there's doors being opened and shut at the freezers, you know? There's a lot of sound that is happening in that space. And for him, he perceives all of that sound. So that means that he will react to being around all that sound at the same time. One of the things that he could do is, for example, put his hands over his ears just to be able to manage the sound. And now consider the smells. So you go into the vegetable section. You have coriander, you have peppers, you have carrots, you have chilies, you have fruit. There's so many different smells all commingling in one place. Imagine that you're sensitive to smell, and all that smell sort of comes to you almost at the same time. It can be overwhelming. It's almost as though I'd describe it as you walk into a smoky building, and so you really don't want to take in the smoke. So your reaction would be to cough, you know? But an autistic person may have a different reaction. So now we've looked at sound, we've looked at smell. Now consider we go into a space where we've got different temperatures, you know? So here, when you're at the fridge, it's cold. When you go towards the bakery, it's hot. When you're somewhere in the middle, it's warm. So suddenly, his experience of his environment is all these different variations in temperature. He's wondering, why is everything so different? How do I adjust to this? So, something as simple as walking into a supermarket to buy milk and bread can lead to actually an overwhelming experience for the person or the child who is on the autistic spectrum. And because of that overwhelm, they will show what they're experiencing in different ways. And these are normally behavioral. Different ways that autistic people behave physically, emotionally to express their discomfort. All right. So this is just sort of giving you an idea of what his experience could look like. Now, there's a comment here that I think I should share with you before I move on. I'll just read it out. And it's from Osaro, and it says, I reckon that there is a bit of opening up on this condition in our time compared to many years ago. I remember not so long ago when a friend told me her child had autism. I was immediately taken aback that she said it so casually and easily. I withheld my emotions in order not to embarrass myself. I went back and studied more about this condition and I became more enlightened, you know? And I think, thank you really for sharing that comment. As a parent, there are different ways that we cope. I think before acceptance of the diagnosis of autism, you feel as though you want to hide because you don't want to be the person who has a child who has a challenge that they're dealing with. So there's that feeling of, I want to hide away from this. And maybe if I do, and if I hide my child, then it won't be that real. It won't have that effect. So possibly, you know, the lady that you're speaking to had passed that and had reached acceptance. This is what it is. And also figured out how to cope with it. But what you raise is also very interesting and something I'll just touch on before moving forward. And that is the people who have to, other than the parents of the child, who now interact with somebody who's on the autism spectrum, also need information, advice, you know, on what it actually is and how it is that they can interact with the parent and the child who are on the autism spectrum, you know. And so now I want to move to something that I think is interesting in an area where if As we go through it, if you have information, I would request that you actually share it with us. And that is a little bit on the statistics around autism, and specifically the statistics in Africa around autism. Now, what was interesting for me when looking for this information is the lack of information. So I was able to find some information on autism in Nigeria, some information on autism in South Africa. But for the other countries in Africa, the information really, really is limited. And so, what that calls out to me is that there's a need to look at autism in each country, in each area, and actually identify prevalence of autism in a statistical perspective. What is being done in terms of resources available, and understand what does it look like to manage autism and support caregivers of people who are autistic. So I'm going to share with you in just a moment some statistics on autism. And these statistics are from a study that was done in Nigeria. And I find for the most part, they are more or less reflective of what is happening in Nairobi as well. But for now, as we discuss Africa, let's look at these statistics. So the first one, an estimated 40% of people with autism are nonverbal. And I'll explain this term. What does nonverbal mean? Nonverbal, also referred to as non-speaking, means that the person who has autism is unable to speak, right? And to speak, what I mean here is form words with their mouth and say out the words. So there's different ways that they're able to communicate, but not necessarily able to speak. And I think it's really important to understand that. If you remember, at the beginning of this talk, I mentioned before being in the autism space, my perception of people with autism were those who are in their own worlds. So sometimes when somebody is nonverbal or non-speaking, it may seem really like they're in their own words. Some may even think that they don't want to communicate with you. Sometimes people with autism say one or two words and then don't say them again. So the perception of what that is may be like they're doing it deliberately. Now, my son, for example, is nonverbal, but he's highly communicative. He has different ways that he communicates. And for the first few years of his life, I did something, or I perceived his being nonverbal as him not understanding. Oh my goodness, how wrong was I? So I thought that because he doesn't respond back, I had no way to gauge whether he understands what it is that I'm telling him, whether he gets it when I'm trying to give him a point. I could not sort of measure how much he was learning when he was in school or at home. How was his ability to follow instructions? And as he got older, I quickly realized that he understands everything. He understands language. I'm able to speak to him, give him an instruction, and he's able to carry it out. He does have a very high level of understanding. And he has a way that he will communicate with me so that I know what it is that he requires and I'm able to provide that for him. So as I go through these statistics, I'll talk about how it is that we got there, that I was able to understand that he understood me. Okay. So the next statistic is boys are 4 times more likely to be diagnosed with autism than girls. Oh, this is an interesting statistics for me as well. And why it's interesting is for me, I wonder, is it that the prevalence of autism is higher in boys than it is in girls, or that boys are more likely to be diagnosed with autism than girls are? And having listened to and studied women who have diagnosed with autism, one of the things that I've discovered, and I urge you to please go out and just look at the research, is many women discover that they are autistic when they are much older rather than when they are young girls. So I believe when looking at this particular statistics, it would be interesting to really understand whether it is the time of diagnosis or the prevalence of autism, particularly in Africa when we're looking at boys and at girls. My experience of people with autism in Africa is that yes, there appear to be more boys who are diagnosed and with autism than girls are, as so far is in what I've experienced. So now the next statistic: 31% of children with autism have an intellectual disability with significant challenges in daily function. Okay. Now, an intellectual disability is also so broad. And when we talk about daily function, it's also very broad. So when interacting with different children who are on the autism spectrum, I'll find, for example, one child may be very good at expressing themselves, being able to speak, but may really struggle with being able to read and to write. Another child may be nonverbal or non-speaking, and they're very good at art and drawing and music. Other children are good at language and communication, but struggle when it comes to social interactions. So autism is very broad. The children do have different disabilities or things that they need to learn so that they're able to function in the way that we'd like them to in their daily tasks. So here, when we talk about a disability, as I get ready to go to just the next statistic, disability does not mean a full stop. I think many times when we talk about disability and in conversations with other people, when somebody is disabled, it's often interpreted in a way that they are completely unable to do something, right? And I think it's important to differentiate between an inability and a disability. Because with a disability, it's something that you can help the person with. You can work with them on, you can teach them different ways that they can cope, different ways that they can make the best of their strongest suits and overcome these challenges in a way that they're able to function. So a disability is not a full stop. It does not mean if my child is unable, for example, to read or write, that they will never read or write. For me, when I look at disability in autism, what I see is a different way for people to actually be able to achieve something. And so the next statistic is that nearly two-thirds of children with autism between the ages of 6 and 15 have been bullied, you know? And yes, I believe this is true. Children are children. Children of all ages will be bullied. Most likely when they're in school, your child may be picked on and the like. It's something that children do. But children who have autism have different ways that they react to this. And that's why, for some reason, or I believe that these children are more vulnerable when it comes to bullying. And it's easier to pick on them and get a reaction, or in some cases, no reaction. So they are more likely to be bullied when they've got autism. And nearly 28% of 8-year-olds with ASD have self injurious behaviors. These include head banging, arm biting, and skin scratching being the most common. Oh, yes, I can attest to this. Yes, there are some self injurious behaviors that do happen, and they can be very alarming. And as a parent who's got a child on the spectrum, you always worry that one day they could really do some serious damage to themselves, you know? And it's something that, in my experience, I see it going through phases where at sometimes it's really bad and sometimes it's not. And the different ways that people can overcome this, it takes a lot of understanding and offering opportunities for different behaviors so that rather than the self injurious behavior, you redirect that behavior into something else, I'll give an example because sometimes it sounds as though bringing up a child who's on the autism spectrum is very different from bringing up a child who is on the autism spectrum. you know? And actually, it really is not. There's some fundamentals of parenting that I believe cross both barriers. Teaching the difference between right and wrong, learning or teaching your child how to accept no and alternative language to the word no. Those are some of those fundamentals that cut across whichever child that you're bringing up. So, for example, in a neurotypical child, where you might not want them to really associate no with negativity and being stuck, there's different ways that you can actually tell them that you don't like something, that you prefer a different behavior in order to change that behavior. It's exactly the same when you've got a child who's got autism. You learn how to speak to them and redirect the behavior so that any behavior that you see is harmful, you're able to overcome that. Okay. And so I'll ask if my hosts, if you'd like to say anything at all, to add anything, just jump in or make a comment and I'll add you to the conversation if you have any questions. Thank you, Eno. I see a comment from one of my co-hosts. Eno, I'll share it with us. It says, I think awareness programs with special need on children with special needs like autism should be introduced in schools so the children are more informed about the effects of mismanagement through bullying. They need to know about other children who might struggle to fit in because of their actions. And this comment is gold. Thank you so much, Eno. It's so true, especially in schools. And what I'll do is maybe touch a little bit about education with children with autism. We've got in Kenya, we have what we call integrated schools. These are schools that will accept neurotypical and neurodiverse children together and come up with programs for teaching children who are on the autism spectrum or who are neurodiverse. And then we've got special schools that typically deal with children who are neurodiverse. And we've got your general school, which is just for children in general, right? And so when it comes to education, you will find that many children are not exposed to other children who are on the spectrum, you know? And one of the reasons for this, even outside of school, is as parents, often we don't integrate our own children in social settings and in other settings because of their difference in behavior. So your child ends up being isolated. And in situations where they could interact with other children, they don't. Because as parents, we worry about different things, about them getting bullied, about them getting hurt, about them unintentionally hurting somebody else. So it seems easier to hold them back. And the result of that is that many children then do not learn about others with autism. They don't experience them. So when they come across a child with autism, they don't know how to cope. And many times they have a lot of questions. Why is this person different? Why are they behaving this way? What is it that they're doing? But there might also be a gap in the ability of parents to answer those questions for their children if they've not been exposed to somebody who's on the autism spectrum. So when it comes to education, it really does cut across all age groups. Creating awareness does cut across that. And people being able to understand and interact with people who are on the autism spectrum. So, just a quick question here from Osaro. With about 41% that have verbal challenges in the early years, does this resolve with age? And any specific tips on how this can be handled? So, yes, I think what I'll say is this, and I'll speak from my own experience. So, my son is on the autism spectrum and is nonverbal, meaning he's not speaking. We have had instances where he picks up a few words for a few days and says them with a lot of enthusiasm, and then one day stops saying the word. And then that's that. So, how is it that How is it that I'm handling this? And then I'll talk about how to resolve it with age. At this point, what we're doing is going one word at a time. So when I know that he really wants something, that's when I come in and say, if you really want this thing, say this one word, and I can repeat that, and he gets frustrated, and I keep repeating it till at some point he says the word, and then I give him what he wants. So I'm trying to teach him through rewarding him with what he'd like by going one word at a time. But for other children, and I think one of the things that's very important for children who are on the autism spectrum is therapy. And speech therapy comes in here. So it's important to have a professional who really knows what they're doing to go through speech therapy with your child, and to do as many sessions as you can, because that's how language develops. And also to speak to your child, um, and to speak to them age appropriately. So, what I mean by this is because normally nonverbal children don't respond back, it's easy to believe they don't understand. So, you keep speaking to them in, I wouldn't say baby speak, but like they're 4-year-olds or 5-year-olds, and they could be becoming teenagers. So, speak to them age appropriately, have that sort of conversation with them. There's some who will speak and say words. There's some who may not speak or not say words. And so rather than focusing on their ability to speak, I would say, let's look at how it is that they communicate. What does communication look like? How do they tell you what they want? How do you tell them what you want? How do you communicate that something is right or wrong? How do you support them in that way? And you find then that you're able to sort of get more results. In the meantime, I think another thing that I do is just I'm careful about what educational information he is exposed to. There are some fantastic resources online. But the biggest challenge we have, I think, here in Africa is cost of those resources. And I'll give an example of a resource that I used once for a few months that really made a big impact and a difference. But I had to discontinue using it because of the expense of using it. So there is a page online called Gemini, Gemii. It's got two I's, ni.org, I believe, Gemini. And it's a therapy, I wouldn't say therapy, but it's a series of videos that helps children learn how to speak. And it's very deliberate in teaching specific words and sounds and in the way that the teaching is delivered. It was very effective. When my son was watching Gemini videos much younger, he was able to imitate and respond and identify different things based on the words that he had picked up. The restriction was the cost. So at the time that I had signed on for Gemini, it was about $100 a month. And in Africa, that is, quite a bit of money. It can really stretch and do other things. So, in combining that with the cost of different therapies, the cost of education, the cost of their special diets in some cases, it becomes very restrictive, and you have to pick and choose what it is that you're able to do. So, that's one big challenge I think that we're having in Africa when it comes to managing autism and helping people who are on the autistic spectrum. Okay. And so now this leads me into I like to call it a plug, but it's actually much more than that, and it's something that I'm quite passionate about, and I'm about to share. And we'll share this later on our pages where you're able to reach in to our DMs and get some more information. And as I go into this, I'm sharing this based on one point: the cost of therapy in the country. Where is therapy available? I live in the capital city, Nairobi, Kenya. And when I think of where therapy is available, there's some hospitals that have therapy, and we do have an association specifically for special needs where you can get therapy. But this is the challenge that we have. So, first, we've talked about the cost challenge. And then we have just the volume of challenge, the number of people who are seeking therapy, your ability to get the amount of therapy it is that you need. If you don't have the funds to do so, then what happens? Then what do you do? We have a good amount of special schools in Nairobi and in the country. So sending your child to a special school is a good way in which that you can get therapy. But sometimes your child needs a little bit more support and something specialized. And in working together with my son's school, there is an initiative that is being put in place in order to supply children with therapy. So here is that plug or that information that I want to share with you, just so that you know what initiatives are in place and what efforts are being made on the ground to support children with disabilities and particularly with autism. So my son attends a school in Nairobi, Kenya, that is called Fairmount School. And this school is a unique special needs school that has been in existence for 39 years. And the beauty of having a school with children with special needs that has been in existence for this long is we get as parents to interact one on one and directly with success stories. Because many times, as a caregiver going through having a child with autism, what happens is you lose hope. You don't know whether this will ever get better, what's going to happen. You don't know how to handle this situation. And so it's always good to interact with adults who have gone through different types of education and are able to stand on their own two feet to know that there is really a pot at the end of this rainbow and it's full of gold and it's fantastic. And so that is one of the things that I love about the school that my son goes to, Fairmount School, where we get to see people who have gone through the process of learning and come out on the other side, but also really it's a loving community of teachers who come together for the best for your child. And so, together with the community, we're putting together an initiative to hold a charity walk. Now, for years, Fairmount School has held charity walks. It's called the I'm Unique Walk, celebrating what is it about a child who's got different abilities or disabilities that makes them unique. And this walk has been held for several years before COVID. And of course, when COVID happened, all these activities were put on hold. And now we are ready again to hold this walk again. So it's called the I'm Unique Walk. And what is the aim of the walk? What is it that we're trying to do? So in this walk, one of the things we're trying to do is fill a very important gap. And that gap in Africa, and that we've seen in Kenya as parents at the school with the facilities that are available for us as parents, is really in therapy. And so the school is looking to raise money to create a high impact therapy department for children with disabilities. Okay. Now, what does that look like? That looks like having the right equipment for them, the right tools to help them with their learning. For those who, we've got children with a range of disabilities. So it's looking at equipment for children with all of these different disabilities. And we're doing that through seeking to raise funds. In dollars, the total amount is just, I'll say approximately $100,000 to raise funds to build and kit this department, from the structure to the equipment to the therapists who will be working in it. Now, this is one reason. One reason I'm passionate about this initiative and the differences it can make is what happens once this department is built. So, of course, there's the benefit for the children who will be attending the school to get access to therapy as part of their education. They currently do get access to therapy now in school, but there's equipment that is necessary to really amplify the efforts of the teachers and therapists that are trying to help them to progress. But this initiative is so much more than offering therapy to the children in their schools. So, the overall goal and what we're trying to achieve is enabling affordable therapy for people from lower income homes or people who get to a point where they just can't afford the high cost of therapy and need to make tough choices on how they will be there for their children. And so this therapy that will be available at a fraction of the cost, where parents are able to, whether they're a student in the school or not, are able to access affordable therapy for their children and bring them to get the help it is that they need. So it's good to say the word affordable, but what does affordable look like right now in today's day and age? So typically, if you go to a medical institution for therapy, you would be charged an hourly rate, and depending on the type of therapy that you get, because there's different types, there's occupational, there's speech, there's different types of therapy. So depending on the type of therapy that you get in Nairobi, Kenya, where I am, the average cost of therapy, I'd say, is between $35 and $50 for a 1 hour session. So as a parent who needs to have therapy for your child several times a week, it can be very restrictive. And when I say restrictive, I mean our minimum wage. If somebody is earning minimum wage in Kenya, you know, they're earning the equivalent of 100 to maybe $150. That's what our minimum wage is. So when we talk about a 1 hour therapy session that costs up to $50, you can see where the challenge is, especially for lower income homes who need to source therapy. And we're looking at creating a model once we've got everything in place through this department with the right amount of funding that will enable people to source therapy for as little as $5 a session. So that is what it is that we're working for, our long term goal. And not just any therapy, we want to make sure that it's high impact. So that is what we're looking to achieve. So if you want to support this initiative, you can share comments in the section and you'll find out more about it. All right. So now just going back into the next part of autism. And what that is really, how do you celebrate autism? Oh my goodness, how do you celebrate it? So, autism, yes, is full of challenges. There are ups, there are downs. It is a journey. And it's a journey that will test you as a parent and really get you to a point of patience that you didn't know that you had. But one of the things that I love about having a child who's on the autism spectrum is that I have learned to celebrate everything. So I've learned to celebrate good things. I've learned to celebrate every step that my son takes. I've learned to see progress when it's happening. And I've learned to be accepting of what this progress looks like. And so I'll tell you about what a great day looks like with somebody on the autism spectrum. So a great day with like my son, he wakes up well, he has something to eat, we do an activity together, he's comfortable. When he asks me for something or gestures that he wants something, I respond so that he's able to remain in a good space. If let's say we're going out somewhere, I make sure that whatever we need for him to be comfortable, I have ready. And putting him as the priority rather than society and their input makes everything so much easier. But some of the greatest things that I experience with my son is when, for example, he gives me a hug because he doesn't like physical contact. So when he does that, it absolutely makes my day. Like at the moment, after a year and a half of trying and working, my son is starting to learn how to write letters and numbers, which is a huge celebration for us because it started with just getting him to sit in a chair and focus to where we are now. And so progress looks very different for a child who's on the autism spectrum to a child who might not be on the autism spectrum. But progress does happen. Progress is possible, and it happens on a daily basis. What you need to do, I believe, as a parent or a caregiver of somebody who's on the autism spectrum, is to train yourself not to get bogged down by the challenges, but rather to really focus on celebrating what progress looks like and how that progress manifests. Because my experience of being the bogged down parent and frustrated and sad and lost to celebrating is that celebrating brings forth something fantastic. It just changes the relationship. It changes their ability to be able to communicate and to be with you. So it makes a really big difference. So that's one thing that you can do. And here, as we celebrate today, the World Autism Day, it's important that we share success stories and that we really, really share awareness. So, my thought to you would be, if you are somebody who has a child that is on the autism spectrum, allow your child to interact with other children and introduce them to other people. Introduce them to your friends. Okay. Do it in a way that your child is comfortable and you are comfortable. Have people visit you at home if you're anxious about going somewhere else. Just make sure that there is some interaction and that people are really able to be with your child. Allow that to happen. Let those relationships build. Look and see how people are managing and coping. And an important part of managing and coping is create community, join community, find community. There is community everywhere. There are hundreds and thousands of people with autism in Africa. So you are never alone. There are people who understand your journey and who will be able to support you through it. Okay. And yes, I'll ask, I don't know, Oscar, if there's anything you'd like to say or add on. I can, if you would, you can jump onto the screen. And yeah, anything you'd like to add on or an experience that you've had with anybody with autism. Okay. Yes, so as we get closer to sort of the end of this talk, and I could really talk about autism forever, but I know that we do need to keep within the time. This is my takeout for anybody who is really going through this journey. There's something that is said over and over again, and it is important and it's terrifying, but it is important. And that is early intervention. So, my son was diagnosed with autism just before he turned 2 years old. I tried to do it on my own. It didn't work. In order to give him support, to learn, to get him to not be as autistic as he was. And so it only was when he was about the age of 7 that I really sat down with myself and said, all these years I've been trying to do this, it's not working. I really do need help. And I got him the help that he needed, and he was able to adjust, and it really made a difference for both him and I and how our relationship is. And I'm thankful that I got him for the help when I got him the help. I used to sit and ask myself, what would have happened if I had gotten him help earlier? But that doesn't make a difference and doesn't give me any power in the situation. So I don't think of that. Rather, I think of what is it that he can learn now and how is it that I can get him to where he's supposed to be. And so I share that so that if you're feeling guilty about not getting intervention as early as you could have, there's no problem in getting intervention now. So the moment you feel like you can get intervention. Intervention looks like going into therapy. It looks like getting him into the right school. It looks like surrounding him with the right people who have an understanding of his condition. It looks like you taking time for yourself to learn about autism so that you can be the best parent possible for your child with the tools that you have. So, intervention has very many different ways that it looks. One of the best interventions that has worked for my son and I is the Sunrise program. And that the Sunrise program teaches you to meet your child where they are. So they show you the way to let yourself into their world. And you teach them from that rather than trying to get them to really adjust to our world, which they may not be willing or even really able to adjust in the way that we'd like them to. So Sunrise is Sonrise. Look into that program. You'll find that there's so many ways that you, as a parent, on your own, if depending on your resources, you can learn how to really be that person for and with your child. And it's really possible to create community with your school, with your health providers, with your family, with your neighbors, with your community. Become an advocate. Speak out loudly. Let people understand your child. You would be amazed by the number of people who would be willing and able to interact with somebody who is on the autism spectrum and to love them, and be with them. But it only happens if you, as a parent or a caregiver, are ready to create that space for them. So just look out for opportunities where it is that you can do that. For in my experience, when I did that, I had the benefit of my son experiencing aunties and uncles, being able to go for activities, getting understanding where when we go somewhere, people know he might be a little bit different, but he's the way he is, he's loving, and we love exactly the way he is, you know? So open up and you'll be amazed by how people will receive you, embrace you, and support you. As parents going through the journey of caregiving, and being experiencing autism in Africa, if you've got a family member who is autistic, if you've got a friend who is autistic, if you anybody that you know who is experiencing autism, has somebody in their life who is autistic, is somebody that you can support. Support by listening, by asking them what they need, by, just finding a way that you can be there with them and for them. Because it doesn't matter how big the support is, any little thing will make a difference. Okay? And so I want to leave you with this. And here I call for people to start to fill in gaps in Africa. When you Google and look for, or do research and look for people, famous people on the autism spectrum, you will find names like Amadeus Mozart. You will find Dr. Isaac Newton. You will find famous inventors. You will find people like Elon Musk, who are supposedly on, on different places in the spectrum. You will find names of people on the spectrum who have made it in different fields of life. When you look for Africans who have made it, who are famous, who have made a difference in autism, in their autism space, as autistic individuals, there is a gap. And it's time for us as Africans to begin to celebrate and embrace people who are on the autism spectrum. Let's embrace what it is that they are doing, what it is that they have accomplished, their ways of being, their advocacy. Let us embrace them and bring them more to the forefront so that when people look for African voices or any general voice when it comes to autism, we are there and we are represented. And so one person on the autism spectrum who I'd like to highlight today in Africa, her name is Sarai Pala. She's from Zimbabwe. She did a very interesting and fascinating TED talk on her experience as a woman with autism in Africa. And I urge you to go online and look for it. We shall share the link in the comments after this talk so that you're able to go and watch it. It's really, really interesting and gives a fantastic perspective from somebody who is living with autism. And here she shares this quote where she says, I try to use my ability and my weirdness to make life better for the other person. Okay. So she is using the differences that she's experiencing as being somebody on the autism spectrum to make a difference in the life of another person. and not just a difference, a positive difference, you know? So it's really worth looking and finding these people. Let us highlight them and let us celebrate them. And for all those people in your life who may be going through anything to do with autism, celebrate them. And so, if you have any questions and answers, you can continue to share them in the chat. Even after this stream, we will answer any questions and inquiries. If there's any information that you'd like on autism, we can direct you to where you can get some more information to support you. If there is any, I don't know whether to say any key takeout, anything that has really stood out from you for you on this talk, please share it. And yes, celebrate people today. If you have anybody in your life who is living with autism or is living with somebody who's living with autism, or you just, have an idea of somebody who is on this journey. Today being World Autism Awareness Day, give them a call, celebrate them, acknowledge them for what it is that they're doing, how they're overcoming challenges, and how they're really taking a step at a time to make a difference in their space. And just to be, that call or that message could be something that makes a significant and massive difference for them and for their lives. And yes, thank you so much for joining us for our talk today. We are going to be back this Saturday at the same time with another talk for you. Please make sure that you tune in. All our topics are hard hitting, touching on social issues, and designed to really get you thinking. So please make sure that you log into our talk this Saturday. We will be streaming live on Facebook, on YouTube, and on Twitter. And after the talk, you'll also be able to rewatch. But we encourage you to join us when we're streaming live so that you can share your questions and get immediate answers on anything it is that you've shared and be a part of our discussion. So, as I mentioned earlier, we table it. We have three hosts. We've got myself, Valerie Siganga, we have Osaro Aigbogun, and we have Eno Voire Unukpo. And in our next talk, you'll be able to interact with all of us. So please make sure that you log in. Remember, we are present on all social media platforms. So Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, TikTok. So please go to our social media pages and like us so that you get more valuable content. Visit our website, find out more about what it is that we do, and watch some of our previous talks if you're finding us today for the first time. I'd like to thank you so much for joining me today as I celebrate with you World Autism Awareness Day, which is today, the 2nd of April. And also remember that the whole month of April, we're going to be talking about autism awareness around the world. So please do some learning, make sure you get some information. And yes, thank you so very much for joining us and have a good day. Bye.